this is something we've covered, unfortunately, a lot because it's like a broken record. But this goes back to the thing about posthumous albums and what you do with artists' history when you don't know what that artist wanted to do with their careers because their life was often cut too short.
Yeah. So Aaliyah, her albums and music are going to come into streaming services beginning August 20th. Before, you could never get any of her work or any of her music onto streaming services, but now it's going to happen because the family didn't want it to be put out onto streaming services because of like when they talked to her when she was alive and this or that. Because this was 20 years ago or so.
Yeah, she was
And,
for folks who are sometimes like super young, and like
oh yeah.
yeah, we were also like zygotes at this point. But like Aaliyah was an R&B,
Hmm.
like pop star. There's just like an exploding in the mid to late '90s. Really doing the blending crossover with rap and hip hop at the time.
Hmm.
Really would have been like a contemporary with like your Erica Badu's, your Lauryn Hill's, like was just really like one of those greats. And then like
Yep.
yeah, life ended way too early on. But yeah, you're going on about what there's a lot of things with like her family and what they wanted and what like her conversations were with Aaliyah, right? But then there's also this tension with like what
Yeah,
her like fans
fans.
wants, like what other
Yeah,
people who want to make money off of this want. So yeah.
exactly. So there's this whole battle for years about um, putting up her music onto streaming services. So like um, her uncle for like the past maybe about 4 or 5 years said that they would that her music would finally be uploaded to streaming services, but now it's actually going to happen because fans have been asking for it. But within her estate, within her parents and stuff, there's that she didn't necessarily want some of her music to be out or didn't necessarily want it to be out if anything happened to her. So there's just a lot of back and forth battle between labels and rights of the music. So there's been a lot of people who are battling and stuff over the rights of who owns the rights of the music to then do what they want with that rights. Because, like for example, you know how the Beatles didn't own their own music for a long time. Michael Jackson owned the rights to the Beatles for a long time, and that's why they weren't on streaming services until once Michael passed. And you had some other things when then I believe Paul McCartney was able to get rights to his own music again. He wanted to upload it and then put it on. So there's a whole thing with like we've had this all the time of artists and stuff, especially posthumously, either having records put out or having other things put out of them and not necessarily with the consent of them, but then the label or whoever is the rights of the music want to make money or this or that, put it out. So it's kind of an interesting story because it's this thing of Ilya herself necessarily didn't want to have this happen per se, but obviously streaming wasn't a thing in the early 2000s, so it would be interesting to see like what exactly she wanted or what she would have wanted. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. It's really interesting, and there's two parts to it. So there's one part that like, and the I guess I'll explain part one and then part two to this. There's one part which is Aaliyah's for music that was already released. All right. So
Yes.
there's music that was released on CD, other like other like
Mhm.
regular forms. And those songs that were already released at some point are going to actually start making it to streaming services later this month.
Yeah, the 20th.
Yeah, on August 20th. So and then technically, like, as this one Consequence of Sound article that we're pulling from notes from Nina Cochran, that Age Ain't Nothing But a Number and a few early singles from Aaliyah have been available on some streaming services for a while, but now you're gonna get like a proper rollout. So essentially, let me see, on August 20th, Empire Records, on behalf of Aaliyah, will be releasing One in a Million. And then weekly after that, you'll get basically more Aaliyah releases coming on like throughout that. And then a couple other singles are going to be hitting streaming services again, like every single week following that throughout September. So it's going to be like a full on like Aaliyah month essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's part one. Is just like there's going to be Aaliyah music that's releasing, and it's notable that the estate is their lawyers are just like condemning this, saying that they are upset that um I'm trying to go through the name, but it's basically someone who was able to act. Their name is like Hankerson. Um, but they were able to act and get some of the stuff that was in the estate and in the vault of Aaliyah's like records, and then get the proper rights to go through that. Although they didn't inform the estate for whatever reason, the estate wasn't informed until basically the deal was finally in place. So they're obviously upset about that. Part two, where it gets a lot trickier, is the good old posthumous records conversation, because there is unreleased Aaliyah music, recordings, things like that, and
Exactly.
those have hard not been touched. Like it's pretty much very clear like where that's going to be going, or how the family feels about that. They do not want
They
that
don't want
to.
that. And Aaliyah specifically said that herself, that she didn't want those to be out either.
Yeah, and we on Audioface in this entire posthumous records conversation have been like, listen, respect the artist, whatever they're saying. Sometimes the artist doesn't say that much, so you have to kind of go off of what the artist, their family around them is going off of, and like what is nearly around them, what the vibes you kind of get. But still, it feels weird to get an artist's unfinished work that they were in the middle of working on, in the middle of crafting and perfecting, assuming that most artists are trying to do this, and you get this kind of unfinished other people's projection of this person onto the production. And so that always feels weird. And it feels weird with Pop Smoke, even though with Pop Smoke, like his death was in 2020, we've gotten 2 posthumous records. And so at least the people around him are relatively, not too far removed from him production wise. But there aren't a ton of people who would be working on this like posthumous Aaliyah stuff, who maybe would be working in the studio with her. And even if they were, that's still 20, 25 years removed from that experience, that person. You can only capture so much of that with unfinished work. This would like be the height of our concern with this posthumous release thing. It feels highly disrespectful.
Agreed.
Yeah.
100%.
So we'll continue to follow that. Obviously, like as far as the release of the regular music, it isn't great that the estate isn't good with it, but this music, for the sense of accessibility, this music was already released. It's available on CDs. If someone like went to a record store, got the CD, burned it on their computer, and got it on their like phone somehow, they'd be able to stream it essentially. So this is just making it more accessible. I think the estate should get the bulk of that money essentially, but it's going to be made accessible whether we want it to or not at this rate. So it'll be great to at least listen to that, and so other people will be able to, from an accessibility standpoint, listen to Aaliyah's music and realize like how beautiful it was. But yeah, I'm really concerned about this extra aspect of the posthumous stuff.
Yes, agreed.